Steve, in his own way, may have brought some unity to our long-divided country.
Throughout the whole game, we will all be Team Scalise.
We seem to forget that words matter and can become seeds that will bring a bitter harvest.
Today is the anti-Trump fervor that inspires people in social media, in Hollywood.
I would argue that the president has unleashed is partially, again, not in any way totally, but partially to blame for demons that have been unleashed.
Calls for a rhetorical ceasefire in the wake of yesterday's shooting in Alexandria, Virginia, and more calls for unity. But how long will it last? Let's bring in our panel. Judge Andrew Napolitano is with us, Fox News senior judicial analyst. Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, editor-in-chief of LifeZette. Laura Ingraham and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. You know, it's not even like the shooting coverage lasted a day before the Washington Post came out with the breaking news story, Laura, yesterday that, oh, now the president is being investigated for potential obstruction of justice. It's like we can't stay on one thing very long without it coming back to political division.
5 anonymous sources in the Washington Post story indicating that the special counsel has interviewed members of the intelligence community, 5 people unauthorized to speak, so they spoke on the condition of anonymity. But I think what you saw today was nice. It was heartening. But I think some of the kumbaya mentality that we've heard over the last 24 hours does also kind of gloss over just how low we've gone. And I'd say from the Ferguson riots to Baltimore, the total lack of respect for the police, to Berkeley, to Middlebury, where someone like a Charles Murray is treated abysmally, where you justify burning cars, turning them over, writing the F word on the American flag. This is a type of carnage which is going to get worse unless both parties speak out against how it incites the already deranged among us. And
Judge,
it's disturbing.
Judge, we've seen calls for unity in the past, and they lasted maybe a couple of weeks after 9/11. How long do you expect this is going to
I agree with everything that Laura just said, and I don't think this call for unity will last much longer. I was just telling Mara that I really feel for and worry about Steve Scalise, and it just doesn't look good at this point. But whatever happens to him, I think they're going to be back in the pits, at each other's throats, fighting tooth and nail, using language which just sends the wrong signals to young people who regurgitate it on social media. So this is self-fulfilling and self-producing and self-regenerating. The concept of every hill is worth dying for and every battle is a battle to the death.
Yesterday, the House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi was saying, I identify with the eloquent remarks of the Speaker of the House. Listen to what she said today.
I think that the comments made by my Republican colleagues are outrageous, beneath the dignity of the job that they hold, beneath the dignity of the respect that we would like Congress to command. How dare they say such a thing? How dare they?
She was reacting to some of the comments by some Republicans that the Democrats need to tone down some of the rhetoric that they're using. I mean, Mara, can these two stop warring with each other?
Well, look, they should fight tooth and nail over policy. That's what we expect. But the blaming each other and using rhetoric that incites violence has to stop. And both parties have a lot to do with it. There's not one party that's guilty here. If Republicans are blaming Democrats for this incident, that's just as bad as Democrats blaming Republicans for some other violent incident. I think it can change. It just takes political will. And everything that we saw in the last 24 to 48 hours was pretty good. You had the president, who is very quick often to be divisive because that's a political strategy that works for him. He didn't do that here. So let's just see what happens as we go forward in the next couple of days.
In the middle of all of this, Charles, an editorial in the New York Times, which again repeated the much discredited meme that a Sarah Palin ad was responsible for Gabby Gifford's shooting. So even the media is in on this game, too, not just the political side.
No, I agree. I mean, that editorial this morning repeating that was not only scandalous but unbelievable, because that's a 6-year-old story that's been debunked within 3 days, when it turned out it had nothing at all to do with her, and the man who did the shooting was a paranoid schizophrenic. I think the problem here is it's twofold. It's not just the style, but it's also the objectives. There's now a style in our politics where the ad hominem is the norm, and that's I mean, people ought to fight over policy, but once you begin to question the motives, the patriotism of your opponent, you've gone too far. But the worst thing, and I think this is overlooked, the two parties, the two ideologies, you might say, speak about the politics in apocalyptic terms. If the other guy wins, it's the end of the republic. If the other guy wins, it's the end of the world. The man who did the shooting yesterday is a man who bought into that, quite literally. I mean, you can speak about hyperbolically, but when those are the stakes, when you say, unless we stop Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, the republic will not survive, then that justifies anything. That's the language, the ideology, the rationale of terrorists. The fate of the world hangs on this. And it's up to the leadership to say these are policies. This is not the fate of the republic.
And it happened again today in Georgia, the race for the 6th congressional district. And we know how rancorous that has been. Today, some suspicious packages were delivered to Karen Handel's house and her neighbors. She had a statement saying, quote, "This afternoon we had some suspicious packages delivered to our house and to our neighbors. The packages contained threatening letters and a suspicious substance. The police were quickly notified and the street is now being blocked off. We will continue to coordinate with law enforcement as necessary." Laura, I read the letter. You certainly can't repeat it on television. Right. But the vitriol was just vile.
That is echoed by other congressmen who say that at these town hall meetings, it's not just raising your hand and asking a tough question, which I think is great. That's what those town hall meetings should be. But it's a level of viciousness and vitriol that we see on social media, but usually that's an anonymous thing. But now people are emboldened, and they're actually saying it in person. They're doing chalk drawings of people and their families on their driveways. So they wake up in the morning and they see a chalk drawing. But I think Charles is right. This apocalyptic language we hear on other cable networks, where these are supposedly very respected hosts who get up every morning and say, "Will our republic survive Donald Trump?" In other words, the resistance is a physical resistance. If you believe your survival is at risk, it's almost, you have a moral duty to physically resist that, and I think this freak yesterday took it to heart.
Judge Amar, can we dial back from this? How do we dial back?
Well, I don't know. I mean, every time 5 or 6 or 10 members of Congress going to appear in public, do we have to have 50 cops with them?
It looks like it.
Are they going to start carrying weapons themselves? Many of them carry sidearms at home, and they're not allowed to carry them here in D.C.
There's a lot of things that can be done to dial back. First of all, how about members of Congress doing things together? This baseball game is an incredibly
doesn't fit the zero-sum game.
Doesn't fit the zero-sum game, but they can force themselves to do that because that's how things used to work a long time ago. The president can set a tone. I thought he did set the tone yesterday. He can keep it up. He doesn't have to demonize his enemies. And every single person in a position of leadership can conduct themselves with restraint, and they know, every member of leadership privately will tell you they can't stand what's going on and how things have devolved. So, okay, change it.
All right.
What the president can do is to declare in advance that the outcome of the ball game is a tie.
I don't necessarily know he's going to do that, Charles.